Hello, everyone. I'm Nishant. I'm a postdoctoral researcher advised by Professor Eric Severson at WEMPEC, and I'm presenting our experience 3D printing electric machines. So, in this presentation, I will talk about an axial flux machine stator that we 3D printed and characterized as a case study. So, how do you 3D print electric machines, or can you 3D print an electric machine? So, going with the recent trends of asking ChatGPT for answers, we asked the same question, and looks like ChatGPT thinks it's not a straightforward process and it requires specialized knowledge and equipment. Well, you're at the right place. The electric machines expertise is provided by WEMPEC in this project with myself and my advisor, and we collaborated with a material science team at the University of Sheffield in UK, part of the MAP consortium. Our work so far has resulted in one publication and one transactions paper that's currently under review. So since the contents of this presentation are under review, the contents are confidential. The outline of this presentation is as follows. So first I'll present the background of 3D printed electric machines and then present the axial flux machine case study. I'll tell you why we chose an axial flux machine at all. We could have 3D printed a radial flux machine or a very different machine. I'll then present the design details, the details of the prototype and experimental results. And finally, we will draw conclusions from the work that we did. So all application areas desire electric machines that are power dense, efficient, cost effective, and manufacturable. But how can today's electric machines reach these objectives and realize the next generation electric machines? Well, turns out there are key enablers which are better thermal management, topology optimization, use of high performance exotic materials, multiphysics analysis, and efficient control can all allow us to realize the next generation electric machines. But among these, three of these, that is better thermal management, topology optimization, and better materials, are actually enabled by 3D printing. So 3D printing unlocks the full potential of three of five key enablers for the next generation electric machine. So 3D printing is an interesting area to investigate to realize the next generation high performance electric machines. 3D printing enables fabricating electric machine components with unconventional and novel shapes, including those realized from topology optimization, which cannot be conventionally manufactured. Literature has investigated 3D printed soft magnetic components, 3D printed windings, and 3D printed components for thermal management, structural stability, etc. for electric machines. 3D printed soft magnetic components are particularly challenging due to the need to achieve good magnetic characteristics and reduce the induced eddy current losses. Moreover, although different techniques to 3D print soft magnetic components have been developed, there has only been limited literature on eddy current mitigation techniques in these components. In addition, the performance of 3D printed soft magnetic components in literature has only been validated by testing samples with material characterization tests, and there is no literature where the performance of these components has been characterized by using it in a real electric machine. Conventional electric machines use laminated structures to reduce the eddy current losses. However, the laminations are always coated with an insulating layer and then stacked. This requires multiple materials and involves a lot of intermediate processes, so it does not really lend itself well to 3D printing. So in this project, we investigated other solutions to reduce eddy current losses. So reference 2 from Oak Ridge National Labs proposed different microstructures to emulate laminations, characterized them using conventional material characterization tests on miniature samples, and reported that using the Hilbert pattern actually uh, can reduce the eddy current losses significantly in 3D printed components. The Hilbert pattern is also attractive since it is a continuous pattern and it lends itself very well to 3D printing. There is no literature where the Hilbert pattern is adapted into a full stator or a full electric machine component. The other solution we found in literature was to use high resistivity materials such as 6.5% silicon steel. Previous work from the US Department of Energy and other literature shows that Using this material can significantly increase the resistivity of uh, steel and reduce the eddy current losses. However, the 6.5% silicon steel is brittle and difficult to process into laminations, which has so far limited its popularity. So we were curious to see how it works with 3D printing, and our collaborators at Sheffield investigated and developed the process parameters to process 6.5% silicon steel using 3D printing. This work uses the Hilbert structure and 6.5% silicon steel as design handles to reduce eddy currents in 3D printed soft magnetic electric machine components. So why did we select an axial flux machine for our case study? Well, we actually built an axial flux machine for a different project that we presented at the annual review 2 years ago to electrify an off-highway vehicle. And during our experience, we found that there are pretty much two processes with which you can build axial flux machine laminated stators. So the first process is to take a tape wound core and machine slots into it. And the second process is to stamp slots into steel strip and then wind them into a tape wound core. But the major problem with both these processes are the low tolerances that you could achieve, splayed laminations. So I can show you the stator if you visit my poster later. You can see that the laminations can get splayed, and this is also very expensive to build. So here is a problem. So axial flux machines are well known for their torque density and power density, but fabricating laminated stators for them is not very efficient. So that's why we looked at 3D printing for this machine. So now I'll present the design details of our axial flux machine. So the machine that we selected is an 8-pole pair machine with 24 stator slots, and it has a maximum rated speed of 6000 RPM and a rated power of approximately 10 kilowatts. So the stator of this machine was designed by adapting the Hilbert pattern into the yoke and the tooth structures. And these structures were so designed that we actually have these flux tubes that carry the flux paths and actually follow the flux paths. So if it's not clear in this figure, you can see the flux path shown in the white arrows here for a particular rotor position or excitation. And you can see how these stator structures are, aligned to have steel along the flux paths. To assess the impact of using the high silicon content steel and the Hilbert pattern on the eddy current losses, we performed a set of FEA solves. So we designed three different cores, where the first core is a solid core with a coil wrapped around it. So this is exactly a tooth in the stator. So this has the same dimensions as a tooth with a coil wrapped around it. So the first core, or core 1, is solid tooth, which is the baseline that you could fabricate with 3D printing. And this uses 3% silicon steel, which is commonly used in laminations. The second core has a Hilbert structure and uses 3% silicon steel, while the third core is the proposed core, which uses the Hilbert structure with 6.5% silicon steel. So the FEA results are shown here, which show that just using the Hilbert core alone reduces the eddy current losses by 50%, and by using 6.5% silicon steel, we get a further 24% reduction in eddy current losses. So motivated by these FEA results, we 3D printed the stator core. So this was printed using the laser powder bed fusion process at the University of Sheffield. So once the stator is 3D printed, it comes attached to a base plate, and a wire EDM process was used to separate the stator from the base plate, and then it was heat treated at 1000 degrees Celsius to encourage grain growth and improve the magnetic properties of the stator and structural properties as well. To experimentally validate the performance of our 3D printed stator, we also fabricated a second laminated baseline stator using Arnon 5 to facilitate comparison. The 3D printed additive stator has 30% lower mass, which translates to 30% lower iron content compared to the laminated baseline stator. So we would expect approximately 30% lower torque at the rated current with the 3D printed stator. The lower iron content is primarily due to the air regions within the Hilbert structure and the 0.5 mm minimum feature thickness required by the additive manufacturing equipment capability. The test setup to characterize these stators is a CNC mill, which is repurposed as a dynamometer. The rotor of the machine, which is the same for both the additive and the baseline machines, is fixed to the mill spindle, while the stator is mounted on a load cell fixed to the mill table. The load cell allows measuring reaction torque on the stator. At different rotor positions set using the mill spindle control, rated Q-axis currents were applied and the torque on the load cell were measured. The static test results are shown here. At the rated current of 140 amps, it can be seen that the torque on the additive stator is just 22% lower, although we had expected it to be 30% or more. This shows that not all the iron that was removed in the additive stator actually contributed to useful torque. The iron losses in the stators was measured using a no-load test. The minimum feature size of 0.5 mm in the 3D printed stator translates to an effective lamination thickness of 0.5 mm. This is the thickness of each of these features. The baseline stator used 0.127 mm thick R-5 laminations. So we also compared the iron losses of these two stators with a 3D FEA solve performed using M1929 gauge, which has 0.35 mm thick laminations that is comparable to the additive stator. The iron loss values are plotted here across the speed range of operation of this machine. It can be seen that the iron losses between the baseline and additive stator are comparable up to a speed of approximately 2000 RPM. Although these speeds seem modest for electric machines, if we look at the frequency, it shows that the iron losses are comparable up to a frequency of approximately 200 Hz. This is a significantly high frequency and translates to a low speed for this particular machine since the machine has a high pole count of 8 pole pairs. So these results show that the Hilbert pattern, along with 6.5% silicon steel, is very promising to realize metal additively manufactured soft magnetic components. If we just look at M1929 gauge and the additive stators, we can see that the losses are comparable up to a frequency of 480 Hz, which is even higher. So based on all of this, where does our stator sit? Well, our work is one of the largest metal additive soft magnetic components in published literature. It is the first published work to adapt Hilbert pattern into a complete electric machine stator. It is one of the earliest works to 3D print a complete stator using 6.5% silicon steel, and it is the first published work to experimentally characterize 3D printed soft magnetics as a machine. So in conclusion, 3D printing is a key enabler to realize the next generation electric machines. Laminated axial flux machine stators are very difficult to fabricate. The Hilbert space filling curve with 6.5% silicon steel is promising to 3D print electric machine components with reduced eddy current losses. And thinner features enabled by advancement in 3D printing technology can actually allow realizing additively manufactured electric machines that can offer comparable performance to laminated steels, even at higher frequencies than 200 Hz. So a lot of support was provided by WEMPEC, and the software used in this work was provided by Mentor Graphics, which is a WEMPEC sponsor. And the metal 3D printing facilities were provided by the University of Sheffield. We acknowledge all of their support. And I thank you for your attention. And to see the stator, please stop by my poster B09 in the lab B533 in the basement. I thank you for your attention.